welcome to a fresh video on the channel. In today's video, I want to go over the Brodie Kemp news, which we have come to see is official, and that is that he will be playing a bit more as an official forward in 2025. And I think whenever something like this happens and it's sort of made official by the player and the club, it's always a good time to reflect on where we've come from. And Brodie Kemp all of a sudden enters the 6th preseason of his career. And so he's past that initial stage where you sort of get used to the fact that you're in the league and players really start coming into their own. So I think it is important to look back at what's happened so far as a little mini reflection in order for us to move forward and see just how effective or ineffective this new role can potentially be for Carlton in 2025. Now, interestingly enough, this all begins in 2019 when we draft Brodie Kemp. We knew that we would likely not see him for his entire first season after he suffered an ACL tear in his draft year. Now, it was interesting when we did draft him because that might paint a bit of a picture as to why we are now seeing him as a forward, and maybe this was always part of the plan from the outset. But if you look at the initial tweet, there was an acknowledgement that we drafted a defender, midfielder, and a forward. And, I think when Brodie first got to the club, knowing that he wasn't going to play, we relied on the same highlights of him as an under-18s player for a little while there. So there was obviously the match-winning goal that he kicked, and I still remember the rhetoric around, he could potentially be a replacement for Patrick Cripps as a midfielder. The reality is he played a lot of his junior career as a defender behind the ball, and he had spurts when necessary ahead of the field. So we've seen him kick goals, we've seen him take marks. I don't think in the AFL we've seen much of him at stoppage, and that might come at a later point in his career if we need. But there was always an inkling that he would be a versatile player. I'm going to fast forward before we go back. We've just come off a trade period where at the very end we thought there was something that was going to happen between us and St Kilda. Brodie has a year left to run on his contract. He will be out of contract in 2025. And there was a moment there where we lost Matt Kennedy. We thought we were going to lose Brodie as well to the Saints. And this was what Nick Austin had to say at the conclusion of that entire saga and, what it meant for the club to keep Brodie.
And of course, Brodie Kemp as well was someone that interest in him came late through the period. I think it only came to news probably yesterday. How late did that develop for you? And talk us through how talks progressed there and ultimately why a deal wasn't done with St Kilda.
It did come up late, and look, Brodie's 23 years old. We've put a lot of time and effort into his development, and we feel like his best football is ahead of it. He's a really flexible player for us and provides a role, especially behind the ball, but also he showed he can go in front of the ball late, and unless something significant came across our desk, we're happy to keep him. That's how it played out.
I think it took a lot of us by surprise the way it all happened, given it was such a hectic trade period, the Houston information, pick 3 information, Owies, Jack Carroll and these types. So it was a bit of a shock to the system. And Brodie, reflecting on it, has a quote here where he said, "It was a weird time and came out of nowhere in some respects. It does open your eyes, but I definitely don't look back and wish it did or didn't happen. I'm glad things panned out the way they did." So if anything, it's more of a, welcome to the business side of things when it comes to the league. And, for a lot of these teenagers that get drafted, it's their dream to get drafted. They get there. There's always maybe 2 or 3 seasons of a bit of a grace period. And then I guess in every career, there is probably a moment or 2 or more, depending on the type of player that you become, where you realize the nature of the business of the sport. And that is you are one out of contract situation, whether it's now or next year, away from, having your profile valued. And I think that's essentially what it was for us. We sort of got a bit of an idea as to what an opposition club in the Saints value Brodie Kemp at and what they would be willing to pay. So there is that. And I think with Brodie as well, as we get into his career, we know that, it took some time for him to settle. He settled, and now he finds himself in a positional change. So if we just go through his career, he's played 44 games in total. So we'll start there. Now, 2020 was a write-off. We know that he had the ACL injury in his draft year, so we knew that we weren't going to see him. 2021, if you remember, he had the syndesmosis injury in January at training in a marking contest. So we didn't really get to see him until the very end. If you recall, we played Port Adelaide away, and then we played the Giants at Marvel. And so he and I think Corey Durden also got to see a bit of a taste of the AFL action. And so we didn't see him until the end of 2021. But honestly, by that point, it was hard to really get a gauge on him or where he was going to be. 2022, he played 3 games and he was the unused sub in another. So we didn't see too much of him in 2022. And I think we got to this point, we just weren't sure. I wasn't sure, like, what's going to happen here? Is he going to make it? Is he not? What is he? You know, couple of years in the system, injury had really hampered him. But we got to see a breakthrough in 2023. 17 games. Now, if you circle back to July, Patrick Cripps did an interview with Gary Lyon where he actually singled out Brodie Kemp and his ability to find his feet.
I think a perfect example for us this year is a guy like Brodie Kemp. I think he's come in, and we always talk about guys that come in, you come in and you just want to play AFL, and then all of a sudden you have this game and you have this moment, you'd have the exact same, I had the exact same, and you have a game, you're like, hang on, I'm good enough here. And then the next game you have another good game, you're like, geez, I can be an AFL player. Yeah. And I've just seen him go from, getting to the side to all of a sudden he's like, I'm good enough to play AFL, to like, I'm an important part of this team now. And he's playing some great footy. But
so as I said, 17 games, he starts to lock himself into the team. And I think he was one of the stories of 2023, playing behind the ball, in defence, taking strong marks and having some really nice moments. So we moved into 2024 this year. He played 21 games, which if you look at the first 3 seasons in his time here compared to the last 2, we can see that shift of availability. So he's recovered from the ACL. He gets unlucky with the syndesmosis injury in training. He recovers that. And now we see him at the end of 2024 and he's really locked himself into the team. Or so it seems. He starts as a defender. The final 3 games, he's moved forward. Now, this is out of necessity. We lose Charlie, we lose Harry, and he has to play. And we see a pretty good version of him as a forward against the Eagles. Lots of highlights, lots of opportunities there. He was the sole forward. He definitely struggled a little bit more with the role against the Saints and even in the elimination final against the Lions. Now, against the Saints, he was the forward, the only forward. And, the Saints have a great defense. They had that all year. They've had that for a number of years. The elimination final was just a bad day for everyone. So it's really hard to get a tell on this. But we are now talking through season 2025 and more specifically preseason. And this is what he had to say about being a forward. The quote is, "It is my new home, yes. It was weird how it happened with the injuries we had. But when I went up forward, and it was a new look. It was something that me and the coaches thought we could work with. Here we are in my 6th preseason. I've always been open, even in my juniors, to change positions, whether that's from year to year or even in-game. I've always wanted it to be a strength of mine, and it's an exciting group we have up there. It's a chaotic group, but an organised chaos. I'm hoping to bring a bit of the backman's demeanour in being a bit more chill and maybe even out the chaos a little bit. At the same time, I could turn into one of them pretty quickly." So he's going to be a forward. He's out of contract at the end of 2025. It's an important year for Brodie. It's an important year for the club. And I don't really have a tell as to how it's going to play out. If anything, it just raises more questions. So there is a commitment of sorts to have him as a forward. So naturally, my question is, okay, what does that mean for someone like Jack Silvagni, Zach Williams, Ashton Moir? Are they also going to be in the mix there? Jack Silvagni is an interesting one. It's a topic of conversation that we see for a little while because of his ability to ruck. So if Brodie's going to be that 3rd string forward, does that mean Harry Mackay is going to continue to play those ruck minutes? So those are where my thoughts go. But I wanted to set the scene for what looks to be a really important year for Brodie Kemp. Whether he's going to be at Carlton at the end of 2025 or not, we'll see. I mean, he could earn himself a contract, a really nice one in this forward line. If you've got Harry Mackay and Charlie Curnow with an intelligent Brodie Kemp who's now worked with some really solid defenders for a couple of years now, he hasn't really had to take on as much responsibility of taking the best forward as a defender. And so I think he would have learnt quite a bit, and I think he's got the smarts to make it work. The question is whether or not he does it, and that remains to be seen, and we will see. But what were your thoughts around Brodie Kemp as the forward? Let's chat about it. Hey, thanks so much for tuning in. Don't forget, you can still sign up to become a Blue Abroad member. What you're going to get with this membership is, first of all, access to all the content that you already do get, but also you will receive a free entry to every giveaway that we do moving forward, a keyring with your Blue Abroad membership number engraved on the back of it, early access to videos, and also discount codes to use at the shop when we do sales in 2025. So make a choice, $10 per month or $100 per year. If you have any questions, please get in touch. See you on the other side. Go Blues.